Let's talk about the three plant paradoxes. A paradox is something that when you first look at it seems to not make sense, but as we explore it more, it does make sense. So there are three things that are interesting about plants as it relates to their sessile nature, their inability to move. The first is that in order to thrive, plants need to capture a few different resources in their environment: sunlight, water, nutrients. And those resources move in time and space. Plants don't move. So plants do something that animals can't do. They have indeterminate growth patterns, which means that they have growing points, call them buds or apical meristems, on the tips of their stems and the tips of their roots. And along with those growing points are receptors that can perceive the availability of light, water, and nutrients in the environment. And then plants can start to grow, divide cells from those apical meristem growing points, and as they lengthen, it causes plants to grow. So animals, our growth patterns are determinate. They're determined from birth genetically, but plants have very flexible growth patterns. And they can grow towards the resources that they need. So a good example of this is our silk tree over here. It was a seedling, grew up in a very shaded place. It needed light. As it grew up, it has light receptors that allowed the meristems, the growing points, to divide cells, and those lengthened, and it started to grow up towards the light. And then when it came up, it started to look for a direction to grow that would allow it to capture the most amount of light. And you can see that this canopy, the growth points have grown most of the stems out to the west. And that's because we live right next to the mountains, and that creates a lot of morning shade, meaning most of the sunlight that's available is in the afternoon. You have to look at the sunset really quickly. It's beautiful. That's the setting sun there in the distance. So you can see how the plant has been able to sense light and grow indeterminately in the direction of where it can capture the most light during the day. So that's called indeterminate growth. Plants deal with the first challenge of capturing resources by having flexible growth patterns to grow towards light, water, and nutrients wherever they're most abundant. The second paradox is that plant reproduction requires movement. And again, plants can't move, they're stuck in space. Sperm cells in pollen grains need to move from male flower part to female flower parts on other plants. You can see our corn at the top. There's pollen that's being produced at the top of that. Right? And then that needs to move through the wind, in this case, to the female flowers on other corn plants in order for pollination to occur. So wind is used for carrying pollen, but of course, with all these beautiful flowers, you can see another strategy that plants use to attract pollinators. They offer them nectar rewards, beautiful floral displays with beautiful smells to influence the movement of pollinators to carry pollen from male flower parts to female flower parts. So you see our black-eyed Susans, you can just see our squash over here, you can see the beautiful yellow trumpet flowers. And then after pollination is successful and a seed's produced inside of a fruit, that seed needs to be dispersed. So again, what plants will do is produce fruits that are very colorful and that have smells or rewards that motivate an animal to come and collect the fruit and then move it, and in doing that, dispersing the seeds. The third paradox is that plants can't move, but there are animals that are eating them, called herbivores. So there are a few different strategies plants use to protect themselves from herbivores. And the first is they protect themselves physically with spines and thorns and other physically sharp objects that would create pain. So a really good example of this is my neighbor over here. He has a lot of rose bushes that kind of grow over into our yard, so I climb the fence and prune them, and they're just full of sharp prickles. And the other day, there was another tree that was growing, and I thought, oh, this one's not going to be any problem. I cut it, it fell over on me, and it had spines that were that long. They were like hypodermic needles. It was terrifying. Another thing that plants do is they produce chemical defenses. So here's a little aspen root coming up. Aspen produces phenolic glycosides in the leaves, and that, if I just, super bitter. It tastes horrible, and so that discourages the animals from eating it. There's one other strategy I want to show you just really quickly. So we're not going to emphasize, but it's very interesting. So we have a cherry tree that we planted this last year. And I didn't think it would survive because there was a leaf chewing insect that was you can see just eating the margins of the leaf. And the cherry tree is not protecting itself physically with spines or sharp objects. It's not producing defense compounds. Instead, what it does is it stores the energy it would have invested in physical defenses or chemical defenses in its woody tissue, allows the insect to eat its older leaves, and then what it does is after the insect completes its life cycle and is gone, it will mobilize those resources, transport them to the growing tips, the apical meristems, and regrow new leaves. And it'll have these beautiful leaves that don't need protection because now its insect enemy is gone, and now it can photosynthesize and capture all the resources that it needs. This is called tolerance, meaning the plant tolerates getting eaten, and then through what we call compensatory growth, it will mobilize those carbohydrate resources and grow really young, vigorous new leaves that photosynthesize and catch the plant